Welcome all. It is my honor to hand over the stage and the floor to Excelencia in Education's president, Sarita Brown. Sarita, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And Emily got right to it without introducing herself. So we want to thank Emily Lavadera, Director of Research, for all that she has done on this effort and for getting us started. We thank all of you for making time in your busy schedules, because these days everybody is on overdrive. And so to pause and to be intentional, to have a conversation together, to think about what we do and how we can work to amplify what works and extend it, that's our purpose. Specifically for Excelencia in Education, Deborah and I launched this organization 20 years ago with the mission to accelerate Latino student success in higher education. We recognized, even at our very start, that the purpose in launching this organization and advancing Latino student success is extraordinarily important to students and families and communities. It's fundamental to our country because it is about the talent for a future workforce and civic leadership. So today, in bringing this newest set of analysis to you, and to do it in the company of leaders in multiple sectors, we're very aware that for those of you who are new to our discussion, we're not new to the discussion of workforce. The tactical way that we are going to discuss it today and the premise that we're going to assert, which is it is the relationship between effective colleges and universities and employers who know where to look for talent, that might be a bit new, but what it is fundamental to the work we do going forward. That's a bit of preface to the conversation. The real meat is what the analysis has shown us, what it tells us, and what it sets in motion. So to present that, I call on mi colega, the co-founder of Excelencia in Education, our CEO, Deborah Santiago.
Thank you, Sarita. And thank you all for making time to see folks from El Paso Community College and Northern Illinois University, Pasadena City College, people from across the country who are joining us for what we hope is the beginning of a more robust conversation that we want to have throughout the year, talking about the potential, the opportunity we have to ensure we have an educated workforce, we're ensuring America's future, and that our Latino population is amongst all of those that are being served well and contributing to our society. Part of what I wanted to take a couple minutes and share with you are some takeaways from the latest analysis our team has done in looking at finding your workforce. Sarita had alluded to the fact that this is not our first time looking at the workforce. Excelencia started back in 2006, not our first year, but where we started putting work together, connecting completion and student success with the workforce, which is why we know so many students go to college, is to make sure that they can provide for themselves and their families and their community. So this is actually the third iteration of finding your workforce. And we started this from a very simple approach when we were as an organization, because we kept hearing from employers and from institutions themselves that they wanted a student body that represented our vast communities across the country. And they either didn't know where to recruit them, or they didn't know that they're getting degrees in areas that they were recruiting from. And we thought, as a small nonprofit, we can answer some of those basic questions. We can tell you where students are graduating from certificate all the way through PhD. So if the excuse is we don't know where they are and we don't know where to recruit from, we can give you that answer relatively quickly. And that started this journey of finding your workforce, which is, you might not always find us in the most selective institutions or where employers and institutions have typically recruited from. But we are getting degrees across the country and in areas STEM, health, education, and in every field of interest. And so it takes a little bit of effort, but focusing on where our students are graduating from and the institutional efforts that are ensuring their preparedness for a competitive workforce is key. That is important for us, and that's a big framing for the series of publications that we released over the last week, where we think is a good resource and a tool that can inform broader conversations beyond what we have in there. That's some of the context. I will tell you some of the key takeaways from our analysis is that we see, as many of you probably know, that we are seeing an increase in representation of our Hispanic students in credentials from certificate through the doctorate. And we are also seeing growth and representation in the workforce. We're going to give you some of the data because that's, as somebody who embraces data to help tell the story, I want to do that, but I wanted to give you the key takeaways. Not a surprise to many of us who see this, but to know it grounded in data and shows opportunities, what we can do. That's the other part of this element. So we also know that while we are seeing an increase in credentials and workforce representation, that Latinos are more likely in low skill, low wage jobs. And we know, given our environment and the opportunities we have, making sure that while we're represented across the workforce, that we are also looking at representation of Latinos in high skill and high wage jobs is also important. And there are things that we can do to make sure that happens. And the last point before I get into the data specifically is that, many of us know that Latinos are enrolled in a small concentrated group of institutions, broadly categorized as Hispanic serving institutions because of their enrollment of Latinos, 25% or more undergraduate FTE. In our data, it's very clear that the majority of institutions that are graduating Latinos overall and in STEM, education, health, are Hispanic serving institutions. And increasingly, we are seeing a distinction between institutions that are SEAL certified, meaning they've earned the Seal of Excellencia for intentionality in serving students, as disproportionately represented in those top institutions graduating our students overall. Emily, next please. So that's the key takeaways. And I want to give you a little bit of data that reinforces and supports those points. So we took a look at key areas of national need, looking at science, technology, education, math, health, education overall. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics has been clear that we expect growth in all of these areas and fields by 2031. Not a surprise, but we want to document and track that, because that speaks to the next slide, which shows us where our students are and what we need to be thinking about to make sure that we not only have the growth in the workforce that we need, but then also, Emily, the next slide, please, the Latino talent that is there and available, and that we need to continue to evolve and grow to ensure that we're meeting the needs we have as a society. So in our data, we were clear, looking not just at the last 10 years, but also the projections of where we need to go. When we look at population growth, we know that we are about 50% of the growth in the population over the last 10 years, and that we're currently 1 in 5 of those in this country today. And we know that in the next 10 years, less than 10 years, that we're going to be seeing where we are going to be 90% of new workers. And that speaks to the youth and growth of our population overall, and the opportunity to address our educational attainment and growth is now. Next slide, please. So again, back to a little bit of our framing and understanding of the context that you see in our analysis. As I shared, we see that Latino participation in our workforce is significant. When we look at overall labor force participation, Latinos are at 66%, which is slightly higher than any of our other groups. We do see that. But when we look at what kind of earnings they're making, that median weekly earnings for full-time employees tends to be a little bit lower than our colleagues and peers in this space. And for us, those are opportunities to take concrete action, and not just the participation in the workforce, but the kind of higher wages and support for the hard work of many of our population. Also, as we take a look, not a surprise, given that you see the lower salaries we see for our population, it's often in important occupations in our country, but then to be more manual labor in nature. And that is, in farming and construction and maintenance, as well as the production, transportation, and material moving, where we see a disproportionate representation of Latinos relative to the management and professional fields and service industry. And that shows, again, where we are, the hard work and representation in the labor force, but also the opportunity to make sure that there's a wider representation across occupations and in the fields across the country. As I mentioned, when we took a look at the data, because what you will see in about half of each of the publications is focused on tables of the top 25 institutions graduating Latinos from certificate through doctorate. This is not a commentary on necessarily the quality or the caliber, although we can make some of those points as well, but rather we looked at absolute numbers. And the top 25 is grounded in the numbers of degrees conferred in this specific year that we were looking at. That's a way of showing us the breadth and growth and the commitment of the Latino community to earn degrees and credentials to be engaged in the workforce. And when you look at this, the Hispanic serving institutions do graduate preponderance of Hispanic students across the fields of occupations of study and across the academic levels of consideration. Certainly when you take a look at the associate degree level, a lot of our community colleges and others, there is about 74% of Latinos who earn degrees at institutions are doing so at HSIs. At the associate level, over half at the baccalaureate level are at HSIs. There are 571 institutions that hit that Hispanic serving institution concentrated enrollment. And so we would expect that there is completion that's close to or commensurate to that, to see that in areas of national need and importance. And this matters when we talk about action, what employers and colleges can do. So in the publications, you will see concrete examples of what institutions are doing that are amongst the top 5 in each of these categories for consideration. So we'll refer you to the publications that has a lot more detail. And amongst the examples of action, because at Excelencia, data are critical, but they have to inform and compel action. We took a look at what some employers are currently doing and more that they could do. And things like, making sure we're restructuring and revisiting our recruitment strategies. Are we looking and going to where Latinos are graduating from, rather than going to the same institutions we always recruit from and wondering why we don't see Latino students there? Are we going to the Florida International Universities, the Dallas colleges, for looking at the successful completion of quality graduates in our fields of interest and study? One of the things we know is that there are opportunities to revisit our recruitment strategies at the employer's level to make sure we're paying attention to that. And then disproportionately for institutions that have earned the seal of Excelencia, this higher standard and expectation of institutions that can show with data, practice, and leadership that they are intentional in serving Latino students amongst all, and the quality and caliber of those students is going to be critical for the workforce going forward. The second element of recommendations, and what we see in employers that are doing this well, is they're investing in evidence-based practices and bringing attention to those. Many of these practices that show, while they might be serving all, how are Hispanic students doing within those practices? And are there elements there that are replicable or scalable that we need to invest more in to make sure that that linkage between the completion and graduation of students to the workforce is overt? And that it's not students by chance who might not have the social network and others to get the quality education and quality jobs that they seek, but that we are creating that bridge in meaningful ways. Those are 2 examples. We have more examples in the publications we ask you to take a look at. And then for colleges and universities, we know that there's some, you'll hear from our colleagues today about some of this, that developing the pathways that students need to make sure that they're engaged in the workforce, but continue retraining and learning and growing is absolutely essential. We have examples of institutions that are paying attention to career pathways and looking at how you can go from being, a home healthcare aide to a phlebotomist to a LPN to an RN in ways that make sure that while many of our students have to work while they're getting a quality education, that they are continuing to train and be eligible and participating in higher levels of occupations at the high skill, high wage level. And then the last recommendation that we're presenting here in hopes that we can spur up the conversation of our colleagues and panelists is that we want to make sure that we not only identify what's working and can make a difference, but that institutions themselves are trying to replicate or scale these efforts. Because many of the practices we see are serving 25, 35, 40 students, having good impact, but we know that there's so many more students that could be served and supported. How do we make sure that those efforts and strategies reach the students as intended and create that critical bridge post-completion to the workforce we all want to make sure is available for our communities, and make sure that they're high-skilled, high-wage jobs for our community overall. So that's a very quick snapshot of what is in a pretty robust series of 4 publications with lots of data, lots of information that we hope can inform and compel action. We do have this available on our website, and we're pushing this information out, but I'd ask you to take a look. And Sarita, I hope that sets a baseline and a tone for the conversation that you're going to be having with our colleagues today.
Thank you, Deborah. I'm confident that that gives us a lot to react to think about. So what I'd like to do now is to introduce this wonderful panel with a little bit of information, not only about their day job, but their connection to Excelencia. So I'm going to start with Elizabeth Behar, who is provost at Florida International University. She has more to her title than that. My apologies, Elizabeth, but she is fundamentally provost. She is at a Seal of Excelencia certified institution, and she is a member of Excelencia's board of directors. Megan Hughes, Workforce Development, Arts, and Heritage Executive at Bank of America. And this is our opportunity as an organization to give Bank of America a shout out for supporting Excelencia in bringing this new series to the public. It was their investment through the foundation that allows us to do this today. Justin Lonan, who is chancellor at Dallas College. He is a leader in multifaceted elements of economic development, socioeconomic development, where bragging rights for Excelencia is he is part of our Presidents for Latino Student Success Network. And Eloy Oakley, president of the College Futures Foundation, himself coming from higher education, a leader of institutions. In fact, when he was doing that, he was part of the founding cohort of Presidents for Latino Student Success. Point being that we have people who have been in this work, who know this work, and who are as committed as we are to answering that fundamental question, ¿y qué? Whenever you do research, what do we do with that? So to start off, I'm going to turn to Elizabeth Behar and ask the question, which is, as one of the top institutions graduating Latinos in STEM, you do well in many areas, but in STEM, how is FIU partnering with employers to connect students to the STEM workforce?
Well, great. Thank you. First of all, let me thank you, Sarita and Deborah, and thank Excelencia for championing this work at the national level. It's critically important. I think for FIU, I'm going to kind of jump right in. As an R1 institution a number of years ago, we had to take a step back because we knew that we had great students, dedicated students, and it's like, how do they break through their own career glass ceiling, if you will? How do they get to that other side from an employment perspective of breaking through to that first HR interview, and through a process that for many who are either first generation, right, or first generation in the United States of higher education's, right, business practices, kind of walking through that, and Deborah touched upon it earlier, right? How do you develop in a student or in a young burgeoning professional that tacit knowledge, that ecosystem that they may not have, right, consistent with other students? And so we took a look with real intentionality about the messaging and the communication to ensure that we were speaking not only with our students about the clarity and expectations that we had, but also with our faculty and also with our employers. I'm going to kind of end with the employers. We began a conversation internally from an institutional perspective at an R1 that is certainly championing the work of higher education and the aims of knowledge creation and dissemination, to say work is not necessarily a four-letter word. R1s have historically always been engaged in contributing to the workforce of this nation through industrial revolution, right, through the knowledge revolution. And so we needed to embrace that. And with that, we were able to turn to the employers and really understand who were our employers, who wanted to be our employers, and how as an institution we could help to kind of break some of those organizational barriers. So we actually took a proactive approach in investing in our career services, not as a historical, oh, that's an office out of a student affairs team or the academic affairs team, and you could walk in there or not. We set the expectation from day one that students were going to utilize the career services teams, investing in those professional teams around STEM, right? Because that's a thematic area to really talk about those capacities and those capabilities. We also engage with employers, and I'm going to acknowledge as well that we are supported in part right through the generosity of the Bank of America program, which you'll hear a little bit more about. But we really wanted to ensure that we could create not a transactional relationship between employers and our university, but a transformational relationship. And in that transformational relationship, we've moved from having employer partners to strategic alliances, which is if our largest health systems wanted to hire igual our nurses, our MDs, or our HR managers and accountants because they needed them all, they were welcome to come into FIU holistically. They didn't have to learn the organizational structure of our College of Business as compared to the organizational structure of our College of Nursing and Health Sciences, right? So we streamlined those processes, not to centrally control it, but so that we could demystify what this large organization was to our vast employers. We also, in that strategic alliance realignment, worked from a very basic perspective of curating pathways for our students, knowing our students, many of them did not have that tacit knowledge or how to actualize that tacit knowledge. We did engage in micro-credentialing on the basics, but from, right, if you will, the pathway of a student from freshman to senior, that the first experience they have in preparing for an internship is scaffolded across, right, a second or third or fourth year and getting into deeper and more reflective learning and opportunities so that students necessarily, right, our graduating students who are becoming entry-level professionals had a little bit more of a curated pathway on becoming that first professional opportunity. So we really have kind of worked through a number of systems and structures that we actually now receive some of our key employers, and they want our students because they are aware of the capabilities and the capacity. So now we have major corporations from outside of Florida and certainly from inside of Florida and inside our geographic range who actually, their HR vice presidents or their HR regional officers, they come intentionally to recruit because they understand the capacities, the capabilities. They understand that it's not just a bachelor's in history or a bachelor's in business. It's that these are four things or the things that FIU is focused on. And so we advocate in that way as well. And we've been able to say to an employer, share with us your goals and we will help you meet them. And if we don't, we'll turn to our colleagues across our SEAL certified partners, across our pathway of other state university system and Florida college system. We want our employers to not feel that gap, right? That touches upon some of the work that Deborah has shared, which is there's a gap, but it's a misalignment. It's not that there's not humans, it's that they're not in the right place. So we're happy to be part of that solution.
Wonderful. Elizabeth, you referenced, and because Deborah and I have had the opportunity to go a little deeper, we know some of the work that you've done with healthcare and Progresando and efforts like that. So what Deborah has taught me is that when you have a rich answer like that, you tick off some of the key elements. So you looked at what was available for students, you strengthened the elements in your day-to-day operation that would support them. You also looked at what employers need, and something that is not common in many institutions of higher education. You accepted that our nomenclature and our methods, that they're good, they're wonderful, they're strong, but they can be a little mysterious when you have someone outside that is looking for talent. So bridge that. There were many things in your answers, which I think will touch on what others think about and what we do. To follow this, I would like to turn to Megan Hughes and to ask her to think about what it is today at Bank of America and what your recruitment strategy keys off of, what you're looking for when you overtly look for Latino talent and when you look for talent for the enterprise. How is the bank partnering with institutions across the country? Elements about this very dynamic on the receiving end as the speaker on this panel, speaking for companies and employers.
Thank you, Sarita. I do want to begin just by thanking Excelencia, thanking you, Sarita, thanking you, Deborah, for the invitation I have admired the work of your organization for many years and am delighted that my new employer, Bank of America, is your partner. When I think about why I believe this partnership is so natural, the bank is a results-oriented for-profit organization. And we're looking to partner with organizations like yours that have pragmatic, actionable solutions. And so when I think about the paper that you've just released, that is going to inform how I lead the strategy for this organization and partner across the enterprise in order to continue to recruit the best talent in the country. And that talent is heavily represented in the Latino population. I'm really honored to join my fellow panelists who are leading the work of this transformational change. Both Dallas College and FIU are part of our Signature Jobs partnership. I'm going to very briefly say a little bit more about myself to establish some context. So I'm about 100 days into this new role, having spent my entire career in higher education, nonprofit workforce development, and most recently the public sector. So I just stepped down after nearly 8 years at the Community College of Rhode Island. We serve roughly 40,000 Rhode Islanders learners annually. I am quite new at the bank, though I have partnered closely with the bank for many years, and speaking frankly, understanding that this bank actually walks the walk is what made me want to join the team. Just finally, I want to thank two teammates from the bank who absolutely did the heavy lifting to get me here. So Rhonda McNutt, who helps to lead those Signature Jobs partnerships, and then Marcela Gallego, who works very closely with Excelencia. So both of you gave me the insight I needed to actually show up and represent Bank of America. So all mistakes are mine, all success is yours, and thank you. So to answer your question, I'm going to take 2 steps back and say I never used the word as a college president, traditional students. I found it offensive then. I find it offensive now. So I would sort of anchor my answer by saying the bank is looking for the best talent in the world. And in the United States, we know that there is extraordinary Latino talent and we want it. So we want it. And when it's in healthcare, for example, we want to make sure that we are supporting robust communities, and we know we need a world-class healthcare system for that to happen. So we're going to lean in, as we are at Dallas College, and try to create and support with our time, our money, and our expertise, pathways into spaces that are going to support a robust, vibrant, inclusive economy that works for all. So with that, let me lay out, as I understand it, how Bank of America imagines its recruitment strategy. It starts with our values. We believe strongly that it's good for business and it's the right thing to do to ensure that our workforce reflects the communities in which we live. And we have built a very deliberate, intentional strategy to make sure that that's true. And I'm delighted to say that if you look at our numbers, we're a company of more than 200,000 people. 19% of our workforce in the United States is Latino. What I can also say, because we know these statistics intimately, all of us, Deborah's slide at the beginning talking about the data that shows Latinos are the backbone of this country's workforce. We also know where they sit disproportionately, and the bank is factually committed and passionately committed to make sure we're not simply funneling a workforce in that's going to remain at those early stage careers. So if you look at our data, you will see Latinos represented at the highest echelons of this bank, and we are committed sincerely to continue to grow that, and there is a plan. I think today what we're here to talk about more directly is how does the bank imagine and get after bringing talent in from institutions like the ones that are represented on today's webinar, and that I truly hope are engaged in listening to the webinar. It starts with our recruitment strategy that applies across the country, irrespective at the beginning of whether it's Latino or just simply talent writ large. And that means we're going to look at the labor market in the nearly 100 markets in which we sit and identify where is the strongest labor market demand? Where is that demand? So secondarily, we're going to lean into conversations with employer partners, again, whether it's technology, whether it's healthcare, and so on, to try to build that ecosystem. Again, that's good for Bank of America. If we don't have a robust economy, we don't have a whole lot of need for our services, right? Directly speaking to how we think about recruiting talent that we want to bring into our bank and develop and invest in and grow, it starts with looking at partners like FIU, like Dallas College, colleges that are either already doing the work, that have received, I'll say it clearly, Excelencia's seal, that are already HSIs. That, Deborah, I can tell you that the report you've just released will inform our recruiting strategy. Everything you said made perfect sense. We could talk about that for hours. So it starts by us looking at our local markets, working with our local market leadership, and identifying colleges, universities, and in our case, world-class training partners like Europe and others, and building a deep relationship. So Elizabeth said something that really resonated. Elizabeth said, we moved the culture, right? And boy, have I lived that. We moved our culture from having employer partners, right? And what you then went on to describe, in my view, is employer champions, and you made it easy for them. So we are looking for organizations that either already are doing that, so we're going to jump in and we're going to move fast, or we're looking for organizations that say, we are committed to doing this work. These are the communities we serve. Will you help us move it forward? And so when I think about the signature jobs, right, that was 21 colleges across the United States where we went in and supported those organizations to do the kind of work I know we'll discuss subsequently, both at FIU and Dallas. What did the bank get out of that? Well, we got a talent pipeline. We also learned a tremendous amount that I fully intend to scale across the country, right? FIU, I hope you learn from us. Dallas, I hope you learn from us. We have learned a tremendous amount for how we then take those learnings and take it across the country and really catalyze the kind of effort I know we're all committed. What I will say in addition to that is being very practical. I love that Justin's focus at Dallas has been on where's the labor market, right? You all have really focused on business, on technology, on healthcare. So that speaks our language. Elizabeth, two things that you guys focused on, which are just make perfect sense. A micro-credential, we've got to continue to push the envelope to get the workforce we need as quickly as possible, and then continue to upskill them. And then I'll just say it, let's see, as politely as I can, taking down the silos that exist across academia between the academic side, the workforce development side, and then really insisting that actually preparing graduates for a job is not a dirty word. It's actually what our students and their families, I continue to use the word us because I still feel like I've got that president hat on. We have to do that. That's our job. Those are our clients. So I'm inspired by listening to the work that the bank has gotten behind. In terms of finance, because at the end of the day, we are a financial services provider. Across the country, we are rolling out in partnership with colleges and universities the kind of technical training, the kind of credentialing that we will need in order to bring that talent into the bank. And so I'll finish with just this. That's sort of the pre-work to get that talent ready. And we hope that we will be a good fit for them and we can bring them into the bank. The last thing I'll say, because I'll be candid, my ambition is not simply to get world-class Latino talent into the bank. I want to keep it. I don't want it to go to JP Morgan, with all due respect, if JP is on the call. We want to keep it. So what are we doing inside the bank? I'll end where I started. a young, talented Latino coming into the bank wants to see that they have the opportunity to reach the office of the CEO. They want to see that their manager and their manager's manager looks like them, has a shared cultural experience. And so I'll finish just by saying, I think the HR team at Bank of America is second to none. I think that commitment is real and is a huge part of the reason why, I left the space I was in and for the first time in more than 30 years moved into the for-profit. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And as the standard bearer for the employer, we appreciate your enthusiasm for what can happen when Latino talent comes into Bank of America. We'll put it out there saying now our job will be to talk with many other employers to have the same sort of systematic method for finding talent and bringing it in, as well as your philanthropic investment in talent development. So Megan's comments, Chancellor Lonan, set up very nicely. You've had several references. The floor is yours to now tell us more about Dallas College, why it is that you're in the research, and also what it is that is your vision for this going forward.
Well, thank you for that. And again, I'll echo my colleagues' comments. I appreciate the work, Sarita and Deborah, and the partnership with Excellencia in all that we do. And with my esteemed colleagues here to participate in this conversation and discussion. And I saw in the chat there are several Texans that are participating, and that's no surprise because this is core to the work that we do here. And so for us, we're a large institution. We've got 130,000 students, both on the credit and non-credit workforce side. We have 30,000 high school students through our dual credit early college, high school P-Tech programs. So we're always focused on what can we do at scale. And, about 49% of our students are Latino, about 23% African-American, about 8% Asian. So as an open door institution, we reflect the community that we serve, and we intently focus on supporting students. And I talk about ultimately here at Dallas College, we are in the barrier busting business. We are intently focused on those barriers that get in the way of student success to, through, and beyond our doors. And so we know oftentimes it's the life issues. So it's the wraparound services that so many community colleges are focusing on as we are here, because we know that those things are barriers and that we need to support the whole student and not just the academic experience the students have. So we're intently focused on that. We're also mindful that our students oftentimes have not had the opportunity to really think about what opportunities exist for them. I tell the story that we'll have students that come in and say, I want to be a nurse because I love that TV show Grey's Anatomy, but I don't like blood. And we go, okay, well, do you know what a rad tech is or something else in allied health? But they just, have not had exposure to what those opportunities can be. So one of the things that we did a few years ago was we created a living wage calculator on our website that, students that were exploring could really come and get a better idea of what may exist. That, maybe that, hey, I'm a single parent. And so there's a sliding scale of that. And okay, well, here are the wages you need in this market to support your family. Here are programs that align with those wages. Here's how long it takes to do those programs. Here's real-time jobs and employers. So it helps students in that exploration part. And then the other thing that we did is we created a labor market intelligence center so we can understand what's happening in our market. And I appreciate Megan's comments because Bank of America is one of our biggest partners in this work, quite frankly. But that labor market intelligence center helps us understand of what is going on within our market, and then how do we need to align our programs accordingly. And then one of the ways that we really have leaned in heavily to support students on their journey is we created student success coaches. And so we took the old advising model and we sort of blew it up and put it back together, where we doubled the number of what was the traditional advisors into this student success role, and we doubled the salary to elevate the role, elevate the position. And so every student is assigned a success coach that, you know, helps them not just with their academic journey, but also helps them with those life issues. So if there's transportation, childcare, healthcare, mental health, whatever it is, they can help connect to them. And you know, we have partnered with many in the community that make it very seamless to engage in some of those wraparound services. And so, you know, we focused heavily on that. And then on the employer side, one of the new strategies that I launched last fall is our campus presidents at our 7 primary campuses are now industry sector leads for the entire region. So it's not, hey, what, you know, programs are at that campus that I can engage the local community on. It is, what does the region need within these 9 industry sectors? So they are actively engaged throughout our region. We're a large region, 300 people a day moving in with different needs. And so the presidents are engaging directly with CEOs and leadership to within those industries to better understand what the needs are, how Dallas College can convene those sectors, how we can be an answer or not. But all with that intentionality to understand what's happening in the real world and how do we pivot in that to make sure that at the end of the day that our students, you know, this last academic year, we had 12,500 students that graduated with a degree and credential from us. 85% of those were minority students, 71% were female students. At the end of the day, we want to ensure that they get into the job and the path that they need. Again, whether that's transferring to a university partner, whether that's going directly into the workforce. And so that is top of mind of everything we do. And you know, Megan, I appreciate your comments about, you know, kind of piercing that veil of the academic bubble. And we are intently focused on that. And as a matter of fact, here in the last few months, I moved the workforce out of our house to report to our provost. So those sides of the house are together. So again, at the end of the day, our mantra here is that we all are workforce. Whatever the path students are going to take, whether it's going to be one of those fancy credentials and fancy titles and other things, or if it's a short-term certificate that has value to their family and can create wealth for their family. If we do our jobs right as institutions, then we are institutions of lifetime choice, that they will come back to us for additional credentials along their educational journey and along their career journey.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel compelled to say the future is now at Dallas College. And so there are so many things, but because we want to get everything in before we come to the end of this, it is with enthusiasm, President Oakley, that we turn to you to take that transformation element of the conversation and think about your current sweet spot, which is in philanthropy and grant makers, and speak with us about what it is that you think about these ideas, what it is that you're doing for California, but your reach and your thoughts go beyond that state. So please talk with us about this dynamic.
Thank you, Sarita, and also echo the thanks to you and Deborah and the team at Excelencia for always highlighting what's important for our students. So we at College Futures, we are a California-specific impact organization. We're a private foundation here in California, but as you mentioned, California speaks nationally since our size and our economy and the nature of our population. And so I want to begin with that aspect. You know, philanthropy organizations like ours have a unique role in this space. We have a unique role of calling out what is happening, calling out the obvious, and being able to create space for leaders like Justin and Elizabeth and the great leaders that we have here in our community colleges and the Cal State system, the UC system, to do the work that's necessary to grow the talent that we need to continue to be the 5th largest economy in the world or for the nation to have the workforce that it needs. We have the opportunity to cut through the politics, to really talk about talent. I know that there is a three-letter word that's become a bad word throughout the country, and that's diversity, equity, and inclusion. We feel that it is our role to double down on the importance of highlighting the need to reach talent in all communities throughout California, and for that matter, throughout the country. We know that without Latinos in the workforce, the California economy doesn't work. So we sponsor research, we sponsor advocacy, we sponsor policymaking that highlights the need to reach that talent and to create the right incentive structure for, again, leaders like Justin and Elizabeth to be able to do that work. So I'll point out a couple of things that came up, which I think are great examples of how philanthropy can be helpful. And by the way, every large philanthropy in higher education, from the Stratas to the Luminas to the Gates to us, are all focused on this issue of economic mobility in one way or the other. Learners are seeking value in their post-secondary experience. They want economic mobility. It is not a bad word to say that in higher education. It is what first-generation students, what students of color need in order to build the kind of intergenerational wealth that we want for them. So the example at FIU, I think, is a great example, and it's a similar example at one of Justin's neighbors at Paul Quinn College. They have baked in this notion of creating micro-credentials as part of the degree pathway. That is the intentionality that we're looking to highlight, that we're looking to support. We're interested in highlighting policies that also support that kind of work. So in California, Governor Newsom has launched the Master Plan for Career Education, which creates intentionality for all systems of higher education here in California to ensure that they're creating intentional pathways to a career, regardless of the program pathway. They should all have, whether it's, my youngest is a classics major, there should be elements of a career pathway in that major, as well as the computer science major. I also think that for us, it is also about rallying the employers, speaking to them about the importance of partnerships and going beyond partnerships. We always talk about partnerships. My whole life in higher education is about partnerships, but partnerships have to extend beyond the rhetoric. Partnerships have to become real and intentional, and clarifying those pathways, ensuring that employers see the talent that's coming through the pipelines, making sure that their job requirements are aligned with what's really necessary for the job, and that they are finding the right talent in our colleges and universities is important. And also holding them accountable so that their rhetoric actually matches their actions. So that's another privilege we have, is we can call out policymakers, we can call out employers when the rhetoric doesn't match the action. And then I'd also say that, I think Justin made a great point, that the living wage calculator is, I think, just such an important example of being very intentional up front in the design of our programs and the design of the learner experience, so that there is constant information about the choices that they're making along their program pathways. So many of our learners, Latino, Black, first generation of all types, think, they're hearing what pathways lead to high wage jobs, but they're lacking a lot of the knowledge about what kind of return on investment they're getting, depending on the institution that they go to, depending on the program that they choose, depending on the amount of debt that they take on. That is all information we need to bake in up front for our learners, because the reason we're talking about having a debt crisis in this country is because we haven't provided the right information for the learner. We haven't held the institutions accountable for the debt that they're generating, and we haven't been intentional about creating those pathways into careers. And so those are all examples of ways that philanthropy can work in states and across the country to support the creation of talent, to ensure that that talent is getting into good paying jobs and that they're able to build the kind of intergenerational wealth and economic mobility for themselves and for generations to come.
Thank you, President Oakley. To your comments about what higher education has to do, since I would add the very connection with Megan's comments, which is what also employers have to do, and the emphasis by Bank of America in retaining employees. Because fundamentally, what we've been in the last hour talking about is more effective connections and the flow of talent from higher education into employment, and from that employment into our society. That's bold, that's big, we all do it all the time. This particular set of analysis, which looks at all of the country, and then it looks at these three disciplinary focus, all are intended to highlight, in addition to the two institutions on this panel, many institutions across this country. And we are very much focused on elevating what works, focusing on what the assets are and how to build them bigger and stronger. So in wrapping up for the moment, unless somebody has a burning question, including Deborah Santiago, I'll talk slowly just to see. If not,
Yeah.
because I think we're getting.
And I just
Deborah.
want to go a little bit deeper, because something that I appreciate about you, what you said, Justin, and I know this is the discussion, so we can kick it off with that, is that you know, in looking at the tools you mentioned, the Labor Market Intelligence Center and others, it's really impressive that, you know, if I were a student going on, I could see what is the starting wage and what is the average wage, what are the courses I need to take for the fields and areas of discipline. Have you found that students use that very aligned, very connected, very curated content in a way that has yielded the kind of goals you have for Dallas College to connect to the workforce?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly helps on the front end, because what someone's area of interest may be, quite frankly, may not align with what the needs may be. As I said, the sliding scale, I'm a single parent, here's what I need to earn, versus something that maybe I think I want to do. But also, you know, it helps with the, you know, everything comes down to the balance of time and cost, right? And it also helps to that they can see, here's the time I would have to invest to do this, and then here is the return on investment. Here are the types of employers and real-time jobs, and then that feeds in with our success coach. We have success coaches that are focused on pathways that get a little bit deeper than where students can understand. And so it is trying to tie all of that together. At the end of the day, at the very beginning, the student can see the end in mind, and the light at the end of the tunnel, and what it's going to take them to walk through that tunnel, and then how we, you know, will try to support them through that.
We have a few more minutes, and this is a very primed panel. Are there any other comments? Because we're recording this and we expect to use the recording as a touchstone for future efforts. Well, no, on our end, today's conversation has forecasted for everyone who is here the themes of a discussion that Excelencia and our colleagues will be engaged in for some months to come. We are very animated by the fact that within the analysis, there are multiple institutions with whom we work. There are practices that all should examine and consider if they could amplify what is happening at their institutions. And in terms of this relationship with employers, we will be looking to those colleagues who are in the workforce area, who are employers, for alignment as it relates to this extension of the discussion, which is let's look at ecosystems. Let's look at clusters of institutions and the fact that the Latino community oftentimes chooses to stay close to home, and then where are they employed, and thereby what happens. Because fundamentally, this contributes to the broad discussion that Excelencia, in founding the organization 20 years ago, has continued to assert that the growth of the Latino community is an asset for the country, and that to develop that asset means of passing through higher education with success that is measured not just by crossing the stage, but by the utility of your diploma, your education, and your training to aspire and achieve what you want in life. Those are the elements that we are going to work with all of you who have joined us today for this call, who are part of the analysis and in the work that we do going forward. Again, we thank you for taking a moment in your busy lives to be intentional to have this conversation. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Deborah Santiago, Emily Lavandera, and the team of Excelencia's research that has brought this to the forefront. And now let's keep at it, because it is about the action. It's not just the knowing, it's about what do we do with this information. And Emily will give us more information for how to find the report and go forward.
Thank you so much, Sarita, and to all of our panelists here today. And Deborah, I shared the link to our series in the chat. And thank you again to all for joining us this afternoon or morning. Take care, everyone.
Be well. Bye-bye.